more to this particular verses than what I asked for class to read. That's because I want to spare him all the Hebrew names, as you might see. That is the book of First Chronicles. If you don't know and you have managed to skip through in your reading of the Bible, First Chronicles, Second Chronicles, all the begats, and you skip through the first chapter of the book of Matthew because of all the begats, the son of who and son of whom and son of whom, I want to bring you back to this particular passages because they bear within them the nuggets of truth that we really, truly need to understand. I'm beginning a new series. And the new series is only a 3-part series. And then we begin a straightforward charge towards the Holy Week of Good Friday and Easter after the 3 parts of the series. I know that some of you are beginning to celebrate Lent, and I'm asking that you be patient as we actually look at the journey to the cross in 3 weeks. But I want to encourage you that even in this celebration of the season as we walk towards the cross of Christ, as we contemplate the death and the resurrection of Christ, that God calls us in our walk to be overcomers. And so this new series, which I have called The Overcoming Life, is on a focus on 3 individuals, and then in the summer, what we'll do is focus on another 4 individuals in the overcoming life. But these individuals are unlikely heroes of the faith. We've heard of many heroes of the faith, such as David, who slew Goliath and was a king of Israel. And we have heard of Paul, who traveled in the missionary journeys. We heard of Barnabas, who actually took Paul and began to disciple him. And all these things, Timothy, who was a pastor of a church, or Titus, who was a pastor yet of another church. But we do not hear about some of the smaller characters, the characters whom God used and multiplied because of their faith, and wants to show us what it means to be overcomers in Him. And I would like for us, as we consider these people, to be overcomers ourselves by taking on the attitude of an overcomer. Because indeed, as we read in Scriptures, God has called us towards the overcoming life. The world around us crowds around, seeking to drown out the voice of Jesus, seeking to call us to other things. And like blind Bartimaeus, who's sitting beside the road of Jericho, as he hears that Jesus is coming, he's crying out loud to him. There are voices that say to him, "Shut up, sit down, get out of the way." And we need to be people who are overcoming. We need to be people who are able to speak out and much louder. So I'd like to focus on these 3 individuals over the next 3 weeks for us to learn the spirit of the overcomer. And the first of these is one which you will never, ever have heard about. Some of you who are great readers in Scriptures and people who are studied in Scripture may say, "I've heard of that name," even though most people haven't. I can quite guarantee you that you have never heard of the name called Beriah. Beriah was born to the tribe of Ephraim. But it's interesting because there are other Beriahs in the Scripture. I want to start this passage as you go back to verse 20 in your Bibles and on the screen over here. The story of Beriah's chronicle. That is where he came from. And you can understand this. The book of Chronicles is written as a record of the Chronicles, or rather the story of Israel based on genealogy. That's how they told the stories. So-and-so was born here, so-and-so was born here, so-and-so was born here. And the word son of doesn't mean a direct son of necessarily. It could be the word the descendant of, just like him of. And so in the Old Testament as well as in the New, when you say the son of someone, you are saying that the person reflects what the father is. Just as an aside, this is the reason why when Jesus called himself the Son of God, the Son of the Most High Father, they wanted to pick up stones to stone him. I mean, he was just saying, "I'm the son of the Father." But every single Jew who stood around him understood when he says, I'm the Son of God, I'm the Son of the Father. He's saying, I'm the exact representation of God. And he's calling himself God, so they want to stone him because of blasphemy. Well, in Chronicles, when the word son of, or he who begets such and such, it means that the individual takes from the previous generations and the experiences of the previous generations, and they walk in those things. And it might be that they may not be direct sons of, but they're descendants of. So read that as the word descendants. Some of these are obvious because they are direct sons or daughters of a particular person. Obvious because we'll see it in the passage of Scripture, that they are actually direct within the immediate family of the person who procreated them. And we can see that in Beriah and his brothers as well. So I'm going to read again, but this time with a little bit more pause as we walk through this particular passage. So have you got it in front of you? 1 Chronicles chapter 7 verse 20 onwards, and I have it up there on the screen in the ESV. The sons of Ephraim, Shutila and Bered his son, Tahath his son, Elidah his son. Again, the name Talath occurs as a grandson, great-grandson. Talath his son, Zabad his son. Again, the name Shutila his son, and Ezra and Eliab. These are the sons of a man named Ephraim. This first chapter, or first book of Chronicles, chapter 7, from verse 20 to 27, has always fascinated me. But you have to understand that this passage has come under a lot of criticism. And if you actually possess a copy of the NLT, the New Living Translation, which doesn't claim itself to be a translation, but it claims itself to be an expansion of the Bible, you'll find that there are certain references in it that are slightly different, because some of these have come under influences of some liberal theologians who actually deny that the Bible is without error. Because they would say that 1 Chronicles chapter 7 verse 21 to 27 was really a figment of the imagination of the chronicler, the historian. It's not. In fact, this particular passage records something very interesting. It records the passage of Scripture that occurs within the time when Israel was in Egypt. Ephraim was born in Egypt. So let me head back to the man who is the father of the Beriah, whom we're going to talk about. His name is Ephraim. Some of you may recall the story of Joseph, Beriah's grandfather. Joseph was sold into slavery into Egypt. But he didn't stay a slave, because God, despite the fact that people meant him evil, God meant him for good, raised him up to become next in commander in Egypt as the prime minister of all Egypt, just under Pharaoh. That story is an unimaginable story of great courage of this man named Joseph. How God took him from the pit to the pinnacle, as it were, in the place where God calls him to be the one who is to lead the people of Israel into prosperity in a place of a foreign land called Egypt. Joseph, when he became prime minister, was given an Egyptian wife. And with her, he had two children. The first child was named Manasseh. Manasseh means, in Hebrew, to forget. To forget what? To forget the pain and the hurt that his brothers, who sold him into slavery, had inflicted upon him. And so every time he played with little Manasseh, the older brother, he would say, "Little forget, come on, let's go to the market. Little forget, jump off the tree into my arms." And every time he says, "Forget," God is reminding him, "Oh, Joseph, forget the hurt and the pain that was showered upon you by your brothers." And then God gave him another son. And he named this second son Ephraim, the father and progenitor of all these that we are going to look at 1 Chronicles chapter 7. The name Ephraim means blessing. After the pain has been forgotten, then God continues to make you fruitful and be blessed. And so every time he got the two children together, he says, "Hey, little forget, and hey, little blessing, let's go to market together. Little blessing, say hi to your brother, forget. Don't forget him. And forget, take your little brother's hand and walk down the road because he's such an incredible blessing." Ephraim, all his life, unlike his brother, grew up with the name blessing, fruitfulness, that which God gives in abundance in the land. A little blessing grew up. In fact, in the days when his grandfather Jacob died, he was asked to bless the two children. And Jacob, instead of having his right hand on his older brother and his left hand on him, his grandfather crossed his hands and blessed with his right hand Ephraim and his left hand Manasseh. That is a story that you have to wait for another message or go study it yourself to understand why it is so. There's an amazing reason why God instructed Jacob to cross his hands and bless the two children. So hang on to your horses as you listen up and read God's word and begin to understand what he says. But you have to understand, Ephraim, young kid, sitting there to be blessed by granddad, and all of a sudden, now, not just as a second-born, but treated as the firstborn. The one who is blessed, to be blessed by others, and then to bless others who are with him. This is the man called Ephraim, the father who is mentioned here in 1 Chronicles chapter 7. Bear that in mind. His name is called, what is it? Blessing. Blessing. Now the sons of blessing, who are they? The sons of blessing, there are several. And you can see what the chronicler is doing. When he says the son of, the son of, the son of, it is actually the progenitor of the one before it. And the one whose name is without the son of is actually his own child. Shutila, for example, is the direct son in his family of Ephraim. And so is Shira. Shira is a direct son of Ephraim. And Beriah, his son, is the son of Shutila. Taha, his son, is a son of Beriah. Elida, his son, is a son of Taha. And then Zabad, his son, was a son of Taha. Shutila, his son, is a son of Zabad. And then two sons. Can you just turn it down while I talk? Put it up again. Thank you. Ezer and Eliot. Ezer and Eliot were the direct descendants, the sons of, the actual children of, as it were, Ephraim. That is the third generation from Joseph. Joseph, Ephraim, and then several sons, Shutila, Ezer, and Eliot. Something happened to these two young sons as you would examine in this passage of Scripture. And I want to focus you on what the chronicler wants to have us understand. That despite the fact that they may have been blessing at some point and the pain at other points, God never changes. he never does. We may live in a land where it may be sunshine and fruit, and then all of a sudden, the clouds will gather, and then we experience horror in our lives. But God never changes. And in this genealogy, the chronicler decides to write in the story of both these young men, Ezra and Eliot. What happened? And Ezra and Eliot, whom the men of Gath, who were born in the land, killed because they came down to raid the livestock. This is where the liberal theologians have twisted some of our Bible translators. It is obvious from that passage that it is the men of Gath who actually raided the sons of Israel. But the liberal theologians wanted to switch the other way around, that Eliot and Ezra were called cattle rustlers. And thus they were killed by the sons of Gath because they were trying to steal Philistine cattle. It's not so. Let me give you the story that's written here. You see, Joseph, when he came into the land, said to Pharaoh, "My family looks after livestock. They look after sheep and cattle. Would you give us a piece of land that's the most fertile of your land so that we may look after our sheep and cattle?" And so Pharaoh gave them the land of Goshen. The land of Goshen is located at the delta of the east of the Nile River. As you may have read in your ancient history, as if you studied it in high school, the Nile Delta is extremely fertile. Floods every now and then, water comes down, and it's extremely fertile in terms of producing grass and all kinds of things. And so really, livestock was very prolific in the Nile Delta. Goshen is on the eastern delta of the River Nile. What happened in this particular delta was that the family of Joseph, Ephraim included, became keepers of sheep and cattle, livestock, natural. Just north of that, around the Mediterranean Sea, so you have to realize the River Nile pours in to the Mediterranean. Around the corner from it, up the Mediterranean, on the eastern shores of the Mediterranean, they were called the Philistines. The Philistines were seafarers. They came across the water. But at the same time, they were fearsome warriors, ones who would conquer and kill and pillage and then walk away, very much like the Vikings of the days after. In fact, the Vikings took their picture after the Philistines. Amongst the Philistines, there were the worst of the worst, the most powerful of all the Philistines, and those were the sons of Gath. Some of you may actually have remembered a man named David who fought against a giant. And that giant was a son of Gath. They were well-trained soldiers, tremendous height, incredible strength. In fact, even the Philistines themselves fled from the sons of Gath. And there weren't just one son who was a giant. There were about 6 of them, or 5 or 6 of them, who were giants in the land. And during the days when Eliot was born and Ezra was born, the tribe of Gath was a formidable tribe. They were not cattle keepers. They took what they wanted from everybody else. So the liberal theologians, despite they say, oh no, it's actually Ezra and Eliot who were raiding them, it was wrong entirely. They don't know the history. By the way, this is the reason why I share with you history. I heard some comments say, oh, Pastor shared with us too much history in the message. But you need to know this, otherwise you'll be led astray. You need to know that the theologians who actually say, oh, this passage is fake, don't know history themselves. Understand that the children of Gath were raiders, and they swept down from the northern side of the Mediterranean down towards the Nile Delta in order to steal sheep and cattle. That's why the word says they came down to raid their livestock. In fact, those who did not understand this think that this passage is talking about the children of Israel already in the promised land. This is not. Because if it is in the promised land, then indeed the Ephraimites will be coming down from the mountains, down into the valleys where the sons of Gath were. It's the other way around. They came southwards. Those who were men of Gath, who were born in the land, killed because they came down to raid their livestock. So I want you to imagine this. Ezer and Eliot were in the fields looking after cattle. There's an additional information that you may not actually read in this passage of Scripture that is of incredible pain. Ezer and Eliot had no children. You notice that not a single place within this particular passage that they say, and Ezer had a son, the son of so-and-so of Ezer, and then the son of so-and-so who is of Eliot, as I read to you just now. They had no children. In other words, you have to recognize that Ezer and Eliot were likely not of measurable age as yet. They were young children, likely between the ages of 15 to 17. They were out there looking after cattle in a land called Goshen, land of safety, because that was just around the corner, nearby. Their brothers were nearby, looking after sheep and cattle. And these two young men hung out with the cattle in the safe eastern delta of the Nile, looking after the family livestock, doing their duty. Maybe after attending synagogue and attending school, they went off and actually attended to their sheep. And what happened? As they were doing so, giants came from out of their hiding place. They swept down from the north. And instead of just taking their livestock, what does the Bible say happened to these two young men? Anyone? They were killed. I want you to grab hold of that thought. Not just this man who is called being blessed and the blessing all his life. He has been blessed by his grandfather. He's been blessed by his father. He's been blessed because he's been called the blessing. And all he's now witnessed is two young sons murdered by the sons of Gath. Did he dare call his own people to attack the sons of Gath? No way. You're asking for more death in your family. And so the only thing that was left to Ephraim to do was to mourn. The only thing that he was left to do was to cry out to God, God, why did this occur? Why did this happen? There's an incredible pain that sweeps over the household of Ephraim because of this very incident. I want you to read in verse 22, and Ephraim, their father, mourned not just a few, but many days, many days. He couldn't let it down. And his brothers came to comfort him. Understand this. The word brothers doesn't just mean his biological brothers, because he had one. His name was Manasseh, Mr. Forget, remember? But the word brothers means those who were close in heart to him. Those who understood him, those who knew who he was and loved him like a child whom they walked with, loved him like a brother whom they understood, loved him like a father. These were the brothers who gathered around him because they knew that this horrible incident, as he put two young children into the grave, was too deep a cut for him to bear. And all his brothers gathered around to mourn with him and to comfort him. I want to pause for just a moment and ask you, what happens when something sweeps into your life like the sons of Gath? What happens when illness comes into your heart, into your body, into your own family? Failure occurs. Pain. Someone says something to you, and you were so happy, you were so glad, you were so just without any care, and somebody says something to you that was so deeply hurtful that you go, and you mourn over it many days. And those who care for you gather around you, and they try to comfort you, but putting 2 children in the grave? Your comforters can leave, but the graves are still there. It's a deep cut. And for us who understand that God is the God of blessing, there's a beautiful song about the book of Job. That in the days when the sun is rising and everything is well, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed is He. But then when the dark times come, do we sing that song, blessed be the name of the Lord? Do we understand that He is the God who actually sweeps us not just through the good times, but He is the unchanging God through the bad as well? I am the God who never changes. There's no shadow of turning with Him. And in His hand comes that which is a blessing to you ultimately. And that's why Paul is able to say, for we know. How do we know? Well, read the passage. We know through prayer. We know through coming to Him and asking of God, God, teach me, show me. I have no words to say, but your Spirit teaches me to pray. And thus we know that all things work together for good to them who love Him and to them who are called according to His purpose. It's out of the basis of prayer that we know God, and out of knowing God, then we know that He works all things out for good to them who love Him and called according to His purpose. I want to encourage you to be an overcomer in times which are bad, in times which are so painful, even as this. And I'm not going to minimize the pain, because the pain is there. The pain is intolerable to this man who has seen blessing all along in his life. But I want you to notice something after that. Can you flip that? Next verse, please. Could you advance it to the next slide? Thank you. This sounds like he got over it. Verse 23. And Ephraim went in to his wife. That's a very polite term, as you understand, right? So he had sexual relations with his wife. And he went into her, and something happens. Out of that Ephraim, the one who is blessed with fruitfulness, came more fruit. Yes, 2 children laid low in the grave. And yet God has blessed you, Ephraim. God has blessed you with another son. Nothing can replace those 2 sons, I understand. But God has blessed you nonetheless. And I want you to understand what was in Ephraim's mind as a son was born. Within the 8th day, as the child is born, you name the child. As the father who names the child in the Jewish culture, what does he name him? Anyone? Beriah. That's where we get our message from. Beriah. That's the unlikely hero, the overcomer of everything that has come against him in his own life. Little Beriah, born into the world with a father who is grieving, with 2 brothers who have been murdered, laid low in the grave. And I want you to look at what Beriah is named. And Ephraim called his name Beriah. What's the meaning of Beriah? Well, you might not know Hebrew, but it tells you right there. Because disaster had befallen his house. Can you imagine yourself being called disaster all your life? What a name. I'm gonna name forget. My name is disaster. In fact, it's more than disaster, because you read the word Beriah. It means horrible fortune, bad luck. And that's why I call this message Bad Luck Beriah. Disaster had fallen our house. Here is a child born into the world. His name is Bad Luck. A poor guy, because of the memory of the father and the hurt that he experienced. And I do not take Ephraim to task, but I would like for us to be a little bit more contemplative about this. How many generations did it take to go from blessing to bad luck? One. Because of the hurt in between. How many incidents does it go from praise of God and who He is and the love that He showers upon us to the pariah? To say, oh, why have you done this? Oh my God. Why have you kept me in this hole? David did that. We are like him. We go from the heights of the blessing to the depths of the pits because something occurs in our lives, even if it's one generation, even if it's within one day. And sometimes we forget that what we leave behind are the footprints of hurt in other people's lives. And I want you to track what happened to bad Luck Beriah as he grew up in a home named Mr. Disaster. And I want you to understand that he did not choose to live up to his name. And I would ask you, as individuals who will be called overcomers in the Lord, that those who are around you may call you by various names. You may be coming up from a background of abuse. People who have hurt you. People who have said things about you. They have bullied you. They have created within you a deep, deep hurt that you can't seem to be able to erase. And within your own heart and within your own generation, there seems to be a deep hurt that you cannot overcome. But God has called us to be overcomers by His power, by His Spirit. And the one who overcomes, the book of Revelation says, I will make to become a pillar in the temple of my God. The one who overcomes, I'll write upon him a new name that no one can know. Did you know that Jesus wrote to 7 churches in the book of Revelation between chapter 1 to chapter 3? You knew that, right? I think Pastor Benji has spoken on 7 churches at some point. The 7 letters to the 7 churches, one thing remains in common amongst all 7 churches. Do you know what it is? The call to be an overcomer. And every single one of those letters, Jesus says to him, the promise that to each one of us, the church in church age, the church in our day, I will bless those who overcome with even greater things than you can imagine. Only overcome. Only begin to grab hold of the hem of my garment as I pass by, because I am the God who is greater than all the things that you can ever experience, all the hurt that you can ever face. I am the healer, the one who brings healing in my wings. I want you to look at bad Luck Beriah. What he grew up to be is a fascinating account, not necessarily just from the pen of a person who didn't know, but a pen of a chronicler whose only instrument was to tell you the genealogy of this man. That's the only way the chronicler, keeping to his task was to write the chronicles of the people of Israel. And yet, he wanted to put it down in paper. He wanted you and I to know what happened to bad Luck Beriah. Watch this. Beriah was called Mr. Disaster, Mr. Bad Luck, because bad luck had befallen his house. And whose daughter? Beriah's daughter. Beriah's daughter was Shira. What does Shira mean? You know, it interests me every time I read something and I know the meaning of the name, such as Mr. Bad Luck Beriah, what he chose to name his children. Even worse luck? Or maybe hopeless? Do you know what the name Shira means? She who is the kinsman redeemer. The one who is close and yet will redeem. Those who will pay and buy back that which was lost. Even though there may be death in the family, the kinsman redeemer comes and begins to bring up the family back to the status of wealth. As in the case of Boaz, who was the kinsman redeemer of Ruth. The name Shira simply means, here is a little girl I hold in my hands, who is going to be a redeemer of all the things that we have lost. I want you to know that Beriah had a son. Read that passage and you discover that it's obvious that there is a son of a direct descendant in the family of Beriah. And it says this. I will skip that. Shira, who built Lower and Upper Beth-horon, and Uzzan's Shira. I'm going to talk about that quickly later. And Repha was his son. Whose son? His son. Not Shira. Shira's a woman. Okay? So get this right. It's not Shira's son. His son. Whose son is it? Beriah's son. You know what Repha means? Repha means the words that heal. The breath that heals. And all Beriah wanted to do was to demonstrate to his father, healing is still within our family. Healing is that which God gives, not us. We cannot engineer forgiveness. We can maybe promote some degree of healing. We can perhaps promote it, but we cannot engineer it. No physician would tell you that he healed you or she healed you. They only promote things by maybe sewing something into place, taking a disease out, making certain things. But the healing that comes after that, everybody waits to see. That's what post-op is all about. Nobody can claim that they will heal you, but the healing comes from God. And bad luck Beriah had a son, and he called his name Repha. The breath of healing, the words of healing. The things that will be said upon you, O my son, will heal our family. And I want you to know that out of that attitude of the overcomer comes life. Out of the attitude of the overcomer comes forgiveness, comes power, comes grace. And I want for each one of us to begin to grasp the hem of the garment of bad luck Beriah. Because when his brothers came to comfort Ephraim, they also gave names to their children. Did you know there's not only one Beriah in the tribe of Israel? There are 4. 4 kids named Beriah from 4 different tribes. You have one here in Ephraim. There are 3 other tribes. And I will talk about one of them by the time we conclude our message today. Because one of the Beriahs is an amazing Beriah. One of those bad luck Beriahs did something that will turn your head upside down. But we'll get back to this one. Because Beriah did not stop there. He did not say, my heart and my life is given over to misfortune. But you know what? Maybe my children might do better, but might not. It doesn't really matter. He taught his children. He led them well. He brought them up to believe that God is a God who loves and who cares. And he brought up Shira. First and foremost, she's a woman. A woman in a patriarchal culture. In other words, a culture that leans upon men. Not just as people who ruled the household, but as people who went to war. Shira went to war. And where did she go to protect the family? She went into the heartland of the Canaanites. Because she built 2 cities. The word Beth-horon means that which is the house of that which is hollowed out. More than likely, she went to the land of Canaan and began the campaign of creating a place where there might be safety for the people of Israel, should they be found in a place of hardship. She built 2 cities called the House of Hollows. One called Upper Beth-horon, and the other called Lower Beth-horon. Beth means the house of, horon means hollow, the hollowed out house. There were 2, an upper and lower, that she built. One was up in the mountains, should you be unable to escape the giants in the land of the Philistines. The other is in the valley. So as you're running, you have a place to hide. And if they're gone, you can run to Upper Beth-horon, which is a fortification. This woman went out to the land of Canaan to provide safety for the people of Israel. Later on, Beth-horon was to become two huge strongholds that became the place of victory for Joshua and for others. In fact, in the days of Solomon, if you read the next chapter, 1 Chronicles chapter 8, Solomon rebuilt Beth-horon and made them fortresses because it was such an incredible position, such an incredible location. Beth-horon overlooked the plains of the Philistines, a place called Aijalon. The plains of the Philistines or Aijalon was a place where the people of Gath would come and raid the people, and there they would have their parties. It was a dangerous, dangerous place, Aijalon. And the pathway into the mountains was where Beth-horon was built. That was the accomplishment of Shira, the kinsman redeemer of the children of Israel, of his father, Luck Beriah. I want you to understand that she built a city, and the city was named Uzan Shira, after her own name. The word Uzan is the inheritance of Shira, the portion of Shira. That which she gave back to the land of Israel. Do you understand what's happening in the genealogy of this man named Luck Beriah? Not only did he say, I will not be overcome, but he built within his household an attitude of the overcomer. That which says, I will not bow down to those which are losses of old, but I will see that God is a God who is a great provider for all our need, who will stand up for us because he loves us, he cares for us, is gracious to us. I want for us to be builders of fortifications, wherein our children, our children's children, ourselves might be able to go, so that we might be able to build the Christ life that he has called us to. Where are the places of your quiet? Where are the hollowed out places where you seek the God of Israel, the God of heaven and earth? Where are the places where you go for prayer? Where you seek the Lord in the quietness of your own heart? Maybe we live too busy lives. We have no Beth-horons. We have no places where we call the home to our souls. We have no places because somehow or other we have believed that running and running and running and running is all they were called to be and called to do. Where are the places of our rest amongst our people here at New Life? Are we ourselves the people who are fortifications for each other? Or are we making ourselves strangers and enemies? Could we be people who will wrap our arms around each other as brothers and as sisters who will care for one another? I want you to notice, Repha was his son. Resheph, his son. Whose son? Repha's son. Telah, his son. Tahan, his son. Ladan, his son. Amihud, his son. Elishma, his son. And I'll pause before you hit verse 27. Because after generation and generation and generation, 430 years in Egypt, a son is born to the family of Beriah. His name was Nun, N-U-N. And Nun's son was a man named Joshua. That's right. Joshua, the son of Nun, the one who led Israel into the promised land. I want you to understand that out of the genealogy of Luck Beriah comes Joshua, the son of Nun. From Luck Beriah to the great general, several generations occurred. And yet, at the same time, nothing of this could have happened if Luck Beriah simply laid down and died. None of this could have happened if he only listened to his own name. My name is Bad Luck. My name is Bad Luck. My name is Bad Luck. And that's all that occurred. Because out of that generation came the salvation of the people of Israel. That's what the word Joshua means, he who saves. It's the Hebrew rendering of the name Jesus. I told you that more than one son was named Beriah, because they took from Beriah the inspiration. 3 generations after Bad Luck Beriah was born, probably the great-grandchild cousin of Shira, the builder of fortresses, came other Beriahs. Can you hit that? I want to show you the name Beriah. Next slide, please. Next chapter, 1 Chronicles 7, was Bad Luck Beriah being born, the very first one. 1 Chronicles chapter 8, verse 13. Beriah and Shema, they were the heads of the fathers' houses of the inhabitants of Aijalon. Remember I talked about Aijalon? Aijalon was the party central place of the people of Gath. What happened? Who caused the inhabitants of Gath to do what? To flee. Bad Luck Beriah had brothers and sisters, and he had cousins who were called Beriah, but they never lived up to the name. In fact, it was so interesting that Beriah and his family really inspired his family to go back and turn bad into good. And instead of running from the sons of Gath, they caused the sons of Gath to run. I want you to understand. Could I have hit it again? I will see the map. My map, right? This is Bible map of where Lower and Upper Beth Horon is. Do you see that? Where the little map sign is? Aijalon, can you see to the southwest of it? That's Aijalon. Can you see that? They took it back. How did they take it back? How did they take back the land of Aijalon? Very simple. By using the hollowed out house that Shira had built. I want you to understand that Satan wants us to simply give in and give up. But God calls us to overcome. May we understand what God has called us to. You shall not have your own strength, but God shall be your strength. I can do all things. Philippians chapter 4, verse 13. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. For I shall make my grace sufficient for you. In all the things that you have and all the things that you encounter, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in your weakness. The God who led Beriah through his days of saying to himself, as all the people, all the kids who were in school surrounded him and says, bad luck, Beriah, bad luck, bad. He grew up to an individual who blessed and blessed and blessed Israel to the socks. Shall I call us Beriah? Or shall I call us Ephraim? Those who are blessed. Because you have been called blessing, to be blessed, and thus to bless others who are around you. Because God has given us His Spirit to be the power and the life and the blessing of the world around us. Can we rise together? Father, we thank you that this story of bad luck